Yes.
I'm just okay. Hey, yeah. So you and Angie met on a podcast, right?
No. I met her. So this is how I met Jaymie. I was listening to a podcast. Like when I first got diagnosed, I was just like, Googling everything. And then I found I found you on a podcast with a woman, and you were telling your story. And I was like, oh my gosh, like a Black woman from Yonkers. And, Tony and I were from New York. And I was like, and your story is so familiar to mine. I was like, I have to reach out. So then I did. And then, you contacted right away. And then, the rest is history, as they say.
Yep.
That's cool. So it was just like you got in touch with her, and there you go. I love that. I'm also from I'm from upstate New York, so not like New York, but upstate. So we've got the New York thing going on here. So you guys sort of met, and what happened from there? Obviously you met and
Okay, well wait, let me do the formal introduction.
I'll do the formal introduction.
Welcome back to Mommy Had a Little Cancer podcast. And today we have an amazing guest on the show, Jaymie Jams.
Hey Jaymie.
You have your own radio station, right?
I do. Yep. It's crazy to think, but yeah.
So what is it? What do you call your radio station? What's the name of it? So people can find you.
I'm the owner and founder of WJMS Radio. We're an internet-based radio station that is dedicated to basically the underdog. We like to focus on artists, entrepreneurs, movers and shakers in the community who are making a difference that you never get to hear about because mainstream media is usually focused on other things and other people. So we try to spotlight those individuals, and we try to spotlight local artists. We just try to do things a little differently than regular radio stations. So, yeah.
Cool.
We'll put all your details in the link. Right. So people can find you.
Yeah, so you and Angie met, and obviously you met me now. Hello. So where did it go from there then? So you met, said hi, hey, how's it going? And then obviously kept in touch.
So we connected, and we shared our stories with each other and stuff like that, and her story is similar to mine, and so on and so forth. And we ended up putting ourselves in like a group chat. I think Chris Draft might have done it, but he connected like a group of us together who all have similar stories, but we're all just battling lung cancer in various different forms. And so we've been in this group chat now for a while, just kind of sharing news with each other. Angie keeps us up to date on like her appointments and stuff that's happening. It's really interesting because she's like across the sea, hear like all the stuff she goes through and stuff like that. But we did a show on my station a couple of weeks ago where all of us just had a roundtable discussion about Black women and cancer. And we've just been trying to connect any way that we can and help each other out and get the word out about the fact that lung cancer is like the #1 killer of men and women, and it gets barely any attention because people assume it's a smoker's disease, when a lot of us are sitting here as non-smokers with advanced stage lung cancer who are like, no, not quite, so it's we've just been connecting and trying to work with each other as much as we can in different ways.
And I mean, that's something I had mentioned to Angie today, actually, that obviously I had breast cancer or what have you, and breast cancer gets quite a lot of publicity and a lot to go with it. And it's always in the news or what have you. But I personally think that lung cancer should be, obviously we focus on all cancers on our podcast, but lung cancer to me actually I think is really important because it's underfunded. And obviously having met Angie again, are reconnected with her going through it again. For me, it's really important actually to have more people with lung cancer speaking out on our podcast, just because I want to make that difference. We want to make that difference, Angie, don't we?
Yeah.
We want to get out there. So your story. So when were you diagnosed?
Tell our audience a little bit about your
I don't know you as well as Angie does, so you're going to have to kick it from, back in the day,
No, I have various versions of my story. How much time do we have?
We try to keep it. We're trying to keep it under an hour. That's been our goal now. So
that helps me.
We do try.
I skip a couple things, glaze over some other things, but so I was diagnosed in December of 2018, totally out of the blue. I had barely been in the hospital before. I'd never even spent the night in the hospital. And my first time, I spent 6 days in the hospital with a chest tube. They ended up taking out 2.5 liters of fluid from my left chest area, like lung capacity area. And
Mhm.
it was just, it threw my life into a 180 tailspin, to be honest with you, because I have no history of cancer in my family. I am a non-smoker. I've never smoked. In fact, I try to stay away from smoke as much as I can. And so for me, I was just like, I went into the hospital with what I thought was a little cough or a wheeze, something that was, you know, minor. Never in my wildest themes and thoughts did I think that it was going to come out to be lung cancer, and stage 4, no less. So December of 2018, right before Christmas, a couple days before Christmas, I found out that I had some form of cancer. You know, they weren't sure what it was just yet, but they knew that the fluid that they pulled it tested malignant. And then they also did a biopsy on that lung that was sort of collapsed and found some spots and some stuff like that. So I knew that there was something brewing in there, but I didn't know what it was. And then about
And
a week.
how long did that process take actually? So when they sort of told you that, because like with Angie's story, like it took her ages to kind of, you know, get to
Yeah,
the
it took
stage
me
where they
9
said,
months.
Yeah. So for
yeah.
starters, I mean, I went in there, I put it off originally. Like I went to a doctor first, and, you know, he was like, hey, I think you have asthma or allergies. He gave me an inhaler and he sent me on my way. And I was like, okay. And then I went back to him again 2 weeks later, and I was like, your inhaler's not helping. And he was like, okay, I'll write you a script for a cough suppressant. That ought to help you. And so he wrote me a script for that. And I was like, okay, I'm clearly not going to get any help from this guy. And so I just kind of, you know, kept on about my life and doing what I was doing. And then I finally went and got a second opinion. I made the appointment in September, and they finally saw me. Like, it took about 2 months or so, because as a new patient, you know, they always push you out as far as they can. But
Yeah.
so I went and got a second opinion. And when I went in there, you know, the first thing he asked me was, did I have an x-ray? And I was like, no, I didn't have an x-ray at all. He was like, okay, well, I was treating at NYU. And so if you know NYU, everything is contained within that building. So he was like, all right, I'm going to send you upstairs to get an x-ray, and then you're going to come back down here and we're going to talk about it. And I said, okay. So I went upstairs, got my x-ray, came back down, sat down, was in the office, just, you know, like waiting for him to come back in. And I'll never forget the look on his face. It was like all the blood had drained, and he was just like, are you feeling okay? And I'm like, yeah. It's like, I'm tired, but I was like, I'm always tired. So I'm like, yeah, I mean, I feel fine. Why? And he was like, you know, your entire left lung is covered in fluid. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? And he showed me the x-ray, and I couldn't even believe it. And so from there, he was like, well, we can't tell if it's, you know, he's like, I really need to admit you to the hospital right now. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. I was like,
Yeah, stop.
I was like, I'm not ready. I was like, I got animals. I have stuff to take care of. I have a whole radio station. I have an event on Saturday. Like, this was a Wednesday. I was like, I have an event Saturday. My husband, or, you know, boyfriend, fiance at the time, is flying off to Korea on Saturday as well. And my cat just went into the hospital today. I was like, I need a day or two to get myself together. I was like, I'm not ready to wait.
Yeah.
So I was like, whatever this is going to have to wait a couple of days. And so he's like, well, in the meantime, let me send you for a CT scan so we can figure out, you know, if this is fluid or if it's a mass. And I was like, okay. So I went and I got that done. Fast forward to Saturday. I went through all the stuff I had to go through on Saturday.
You
Sunday,
went
I
to
went
your
to work.
event on Saturday?
Yeah, well, the event actually got canceled. And between you, me, and the wall, I was so happy because I really wasn't feeling well. At that point, I think it was like one of those things where like your body's like, okay, warning.
Like a little bit, like, okay, we're
Yeah.
going. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really wasn't feeling well. And so Saturday I went through everything I needed to do. I sent him off to the airport. My cat came home. And so Sunday I went to work, and I really felt bad on Sunday. And I was like, let me call the doctor and see what the results were for my cat, my CT scan. Cause I just was like, I don't feel good. So he was like, yeah, we looked at that. He's like, you need to get into the hospital ASAP. And I was like, okay. And so my best friend is like, so you're going to go, right? You're going to go tomorrow. I'm going to come up and we're going to go tomorrow. And I was like, yes, okay, I'm going. And so I went into the hospital on Monday, December 10th, and I had a chest tube put in that same day. It took them 72 hours to drain all the fluid out, and it was like a gravity drain type thing. So I was hooked up to a machine that would like
the
suck
machine
it all out.
that does the
It's very unpleasant. And so that took me about 3 days. While they're pulling the fluid, they did a biopsy, or they tested the fluid. They found that it was malignant. So they came back and they told me that, and I was like, malignant? I'm like, that means cancer, doesn't it? And they were like, yeah, we're going to figure out what that is though. And I was like, okay, like, I'm just kind of sitting in my hospital bed, like, They have to have gone. They must have gone to the wrong room. It couldn't have been me. And so I think the next day, after they finally got all the fluid out, my lung never fully reinflated. And so they were like, we want to do a biopsy on it. And so they did a biopsy. And then they came back like a day or two later. And like the day of my discharge, they told me that I had lung cancer. And I was just like, what? And I had no idea what was going on. Then all of a sudden it was like a flurry of appointments. I had an oncologist all of a sudden and like a pulmonologist and all these people. And I was just like, I haven't even really processed the fact that you just told me that I have lung cancer. Like, I don't know what's really happening right now. And so it only really from hospital admittance to diagnosis, it took me about 6 days to learn that I had cancer. And then it took a week from the biopsy. I didn't know what kind, I didn't know what it was. They hadn't, termed me as
Hadn't
positive
staged you, right?
like that. Yeah, they didn't stage me at all. And so I was like, curious. I'm like, nobody mentioned the word stage to me whatsoever. So I literally walked out of my appointment with my oncologist a day or two later, like thinking I had some mild form of cancer and everything was going to be fine and they were going to do something and I was going to be good to go. Like nobody told me at all. And I remember the day I went in, because I happened to get this diagnosis right at the holiday time. And, doctors go on holiday with their family during Christmas and New Year's. So I was like, right before New Year's, I started getting shortness of breath again. And so I panicked and I was like, oh my God, it's happening again. And so I was like, I reached out to the pulmonologist because my doctor was on vacation already. And so I reached out to my pulmonologist and he's like, come in, I'll take a look, we'll do an x-ray, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay. So I came back in and I remember I was sitting in the office and he walked in and I was like, I have shortness of breath again. So I'm just worried. And he's like, oh yeah, with stage 4 cancer, this is going to happen, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, whoa. I was like, what did you just say? And he was like, yeah, stage 4 cancer. He's like, nobody told you that it's stage 4. And you guys, I burst out into tears. I've never burst into tears in my life. I burst into tears in that doctor's office because nobody told me that it was stage 4. And to find out like that all nonchalantly was just like a roundhouse to my stomach and an uppercut to my jaw. Like, I just felt like someone had knocked me out and I was on the floor. I didn't know what the heck was going on. And so I just was crying. And I was by myself. That was the other thing. I was literally alone. I just went to that appointment to get a scan. I wasn't thinking, that I was going to get any life altering news, and so I got that news that it was stage 4. And I remember like, I must have been in shock because I literally just got back on the train and went back to work. And I just was like, I just went back to work like nothing happened. And I walked in the front door of my job and my friend, my work wife at work, I went to the front door of my job and she looked at me and she was just like, are you okay? And I was just like, no, I'm not okay. I'm not okay at all. And so she was like, do you want to talk about it? And I was like, I think I do. Yeah, I think I need to, yeah. And so she's like, I'm going to meet you. She's like, I'll meet you downstairs, blah, blah. So she came and she saw me and I like just fell in her arms and started crying. And I was just like, this is stage 4.
Yeah.
And I just remember just crying. And that was it. She was the first person to see me bawl like that. Like I usually am very private about my crying. But she was, I literally just let it all out in her arms that day, and I remember she just was like, I'm so sorry. Like, what can you really say to somebody that tells you that, but it was just, So that was a very long-winded way to answer your question. It really only took about 2 weeks to get the full diagnosis of stage 4 ALK positive.
And I think it was a great way to sort of, share your story. And it sounds like from early on, like, probably similar to myself, actually, you just said, oh yeah, well, I'll just let me get my ducks in a row and then I'll come back to you, when you first had your initial appointments, like with your cat and all that sort of stuff. And then,
I think she froze.
Oh yeah, I think she froze. Yeah.
We have you.
Are you there, Jaymie?
Jaymie Jams.
Jaymie Jams. Yeah. Maybe you stop recording and then it'll be less to edit, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So Jaymie, so it sounds like initially when you were first sort of in the diagnosis stage.
Pause.
We're just going to resume actually. So the question, so obviously, Jaymie, when you first went to the doctors and you said, oh, I've got this event going on and so on and so forth, it reminded me of, when I was diagnosed, I was like, well, let me get all my ducks in a row and then I'll come back to you. Because, I'm just a youngster here. You were only 31, weren't you? You were saying it like
32. Yeah.
We're 32.
Yeah. So you're saying it like the typical 32-year-old would say, let me sort this out. Let me get there and then I'll come back to you. Because I Same thing. I did the exact same thing. And probably at that time, you know, your doctor probably wasn't used to like typical lung cancer patients speaking like that, were they? Because oftentimes lung cancer patients are older and they're also men as well. So they might not be having all these, you know, these various things on the go. So that kind
I'm
of
on the
resonates.
opposite actually, because like my same thing, like I had, you know, so much fluid in my left lung, and my then pulmonologist was like, oh, okay, you know, we did these scans, you have like fluid in your lungs, we're not quite sure what it is, so why don't you go home and come back
Okay.
in 5 days, because like they had a conference or something there, and then, you know, he was like, we'll let you get all your things, you know, like get ready and stuff so you can admit yourself to the hospital. And then for me, you know, trusting, you know, doctors not knowing what's going on, I'm just like, yeah, sure, you know. And at this point I'm like, you know, I feel like crap, and I'm just like, you know, I can't breathe, I've got an oxygen tube, a machine tied to me 24/7, all of this. So I go home, and that night I felt like, first of all, I didn't sleep the whole night, and then I felt like, okay, I am going, like if I go to sleep I might not wake up. Like I was I and then I went to the osteopath the next day, and he was like, you should not be here. If you don't go to the hospital, I'm going to call you an ambulance and you need to. And I went, and then like the nurse, when I got there, the nurse looked at my scans and she was just like, you had no business being home. Like this is an emergency situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they took liters of fluid out of my lungs. And I was just like, wow. And he just sent me home. Like,
That would have started a very distrustful relationship with me and my doctor. I would have been like, I can't trust a word you say to me. Like, you sent me home.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And like, obviously Jamie's doctors had like a sense of urgency, and she's like, no, wait, I've got to do this, this, and this. And obviously, you know, that's sort of the difference. And I think oftentimes in different levels of cancer care and anything really, you see the disparities, don't you? Where what could be an emergency necessarily wasn't, and what have you. So it is very
like a lot of times, you know, people don't even die because of the cancer. They die because of like, you know, negligence, side effects, like just all these, you know. Yeah. But so Jamie, from where, when you know, got diagnosed and you got the fluid out of your lungs, and then they said, so then like when did the treatment start?
So I waited a month between the fluid drains and starting my treatment because 32, just got married. I don't have any kids. I was, you know, trying to do it the right way. Wait until I get married and have kids and all that, because I saw my friends be baby mamas, and I was like, I'm not trying to go through that. And so I was waiting until I got married to have kids. And so I finally got myself a husband. And then, you know, a couple weeks later, I get the diagnosis. And so before I started my treatment, I went through the process to freeze my eggs, just so I can make sure that later on down the line, I had the ability to have kids one way or another. So because that's still really important to me. So I didn't start treatment. Actually, 3 days ago was my 2-year anniversary. I started treatment on January 22nd after I finished my fertility you know, procedures and all that kind of stuff. I started the next day.
Can you talk through us through that? Like what that entailed and what you had to do?
First of all, it's expensive.
And can you also share whether or not your doctor brought that up with you as well? Because sometimes doctors don't mention that to patients. So I'm just curious as to whether or not they mention the options with you, really.
I feel like I brought it up because I knew that like having a kid for me was very important. And so getting this cancer diagnosis, like, and I had a friend of mine, a friend of the family who pretty much grew up as almost like a cousin to me, like a mom's best friend's daughter type situation. So she passed away from breast cancer maybe a year or two before that. So hearing that I had cancer automatically sent me into this spiral of, oh, shit, this is the same thing that happened to my friend. You know, like, and I'm just kind of panicky. So I remember she kind of fast forwarded or fast tracked her life because she was late stage breast cancer. And she actually succumbed to it, you know, really quickly throughout everything that was going on. But she, you know, got married really quickly, went through the process to have a surrogate, had a baby and all that. So she was able to see her child before, and then she passed away pretty quickly after the baby was born. But I just kind of, you know, panicked a little bit in my own mind. It was like, oh my God, well, I still want to have kids. Do I need to do the same thing? Like, you know, and so I brought it up to my doctor and I was just like, what does this mean for me having children? And they were like, oh, well, you can't. And I was like, Like, can you elaborate? Like, what do you mean? I just can't. And he was just like, well, you can't have a baby while you're taking medication. You can't, like, the side effects or the medication would mess with a fetus. So they were like, you can't get pregnant while you're taking your medication.
And this is
And
medication for life.
yeah, and you're going to be on medication for the rest of your life. So you can't. And I was just like, like, it just didn't compute. I was like, no, that doesn't make sense. Like, the rest of my life, I have to be on medication. I went from being somebody that maybe took a Chewy vitamin every now and then, or like a Flintstones vitamin, to be somebody that needed to take medicine every day. I'm like, that's not me. Like, that's not supposed to be what my story says. Like, I don't understand. Like, none of this makes any sense. And so I went through this whole process with kind of like this idea of like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, how is this happening? I don't get it. I didn't smoke. I didn't do anything. Like, I was myself, my own worst. I was like, but I didn't smoke. Like, how do I have lung cancer? Exactly. I was my own worst advocate. But so I went in and I asked the doctor. He said, no, you can't. And I was just like, I need another opinion. Like, I just believe that. And so I was like, because I was treating with NYU at the time, and I had an MSK, Memorial Sloan Kettering doctor, kind of in my back pocket a little bit, knew some people that knew some people. And so I had another doctor that I called, and I was like, hey, what's the deal with getting pregnant while you have cancer? And he was just like, we usually tell most women not to do it. And I was just like, well, what if like I finish on my medication, like, what if like everything is good? He's like, if you get pregnant and you have cancer, normally women die within the first year of giving birth, because you can't take your medication while you're growing a baby inside of you. So the cancer just runs rampant. And so you literally take a year off on your medication, and most women die within a year after giving birth. And I was just like, and so I was like, all right, like, well, I'm going to freeze my eggs then, because I'm like, my only other option is to have a surrogate mother or something. Like, I was like, one of the things, I'm like, I refuse to leave this planet without having a baby. I have always wanted to be a mother. I've like, since I was a kid, I've always wanted to be a mom. And I think I'd be a pretty dope mom, to be honest with you. So I'm like, I really want to have a baby. So I'm like, that was important to me. And I was like, all right, I'm going to go through this process and this procedure. And it's expensive, and they do not cover it, which I find to be complete and total BS. Because I could see if like, you were somebody who just opted, to freeze your eggs for no reason, if you were perfectly fine and you had no reason. But the fact is, I was doing this because I got a diagnosis. It's directly related to the cancer diagnosis, and insurance doesn't cover it. It's an elected surgery. It's like cosmetic surgery to them. It's not covered. And so I had to pay that full cost out of pocket, which was about $9,000. And that's a lot of money to come up with. Like, most people don't have $9,000 laying around. I certainly didn't. Credit cards are a gift and a curse. But I was determined. I was like, I need this to happen. And I have a very short window to make it happen, because I need to start my medication. So I'm like, whatever moves I need to make need to happen like tomorrow. So
you were able to freeze all your eggs like on the first go?
So it's a process. What happens is you have to make an excess amount of eggs. Like, normally women make, a few,
1 or 2.
Yeah, you make a few every month or whatever. It's not a big thing. But when you're trying to go through this process of fertilization, you're making like a whole heap of them. And so I had to give myself daily injections, which was hard, first of all, because I've never had to give myself a shot. I was like, oh my God. So I'm in the house, right? This is a funny story. I like to tell this story. So I'm in the house, and like, they give you the syringe, and it's 2 shots actually. So I'm like, okay, so I have 2 shots to give myself. All right. And they're like, pinch your fat, and they're like, and then just, stab it in there and give yourself a medication. I'm like, pinch your fat, like it's some easy process. So I'm like, all right. So I did the first one. It took me a solid 30 minutes, mind you, 30 minutes in my house, squeezing my stomach fat, like, like I just couldn't do it. Right? And I had no with me. I remember my guy at the time was gone already to Korea. I was in New York, and all of my family's either in Philly or in Massachusetts. So I'm by myself, and I'm like in the house. My cats are looking at me like, the hell is she doing? And I'm just like, oh, I can't do this. And I'm like standing there holding my fat, trying to like figure out how I'm gonna do this. So I finally take the first shot, and I'm like, oh, okay, that wasn't terrible. Like, it stung, and it wasn't pleasant, but I was like, okay, cool. All right, I did it. Now I got to do the second one. And I was like, The second one was the doozy. The second one, the needle was like this long, and I was like,
no.
it was terrible. And so that second one, I almost fell out on my kitchen floor. But you had to do it every single day, and you had to do it at the same time every single day, because it's like a process. Like you have to inject yourself with hormones and whatever to make enough eggs so that when you go in for the procedure, finally they have enough to harvest. So I did that for probably about 2 or 3 weeks. And then what happens is there's a booster shot or a trigger shot. I think they call it a trigger shot, which is the one that like signals your period to start. And so you take the trigger shot and you have, I believe, 24 hours to get your procedure done. Because if you take the trigger shot and you don't have your appointment, you'll have your period and all of those eggs will be gone. And you'll have to do it all over again. So I got the trigger shot and I did that one. And then I went in and I had my procedure, and the procedure was pretty painless. Like you go to sleep for it. So I went to sleep. And I forgot to tell you guys, every week, by the way. Oh, that's what was in my whole sections of my story. I'm sorry. So
it's tricky to remember, isn't it?
Rewind back to me taking the shots, right? Every week I had to go and get an ultrasound. And it's a terrible ultrasound. It's like an internal ultrasound. So it was it wasn't on the belly with the jelly. It was like a internal ultrasound, and it was pretty unpleasant. And they only had appointments for that between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. Monday.
Oh, wow.
And that's awful, because if you live far away, you have from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. to get there. That's your window, and that's it. So for me, I had to get up at like 4 a.m. every week and like get on the train first thing in the morning, go down there, get there, stand in line, because you don't have an appointment. It's a first come, first serve basis. And the closer you wait to 8 a.m., the more people are in line. It could take you anywhere from an hour to 5, depending on like how many people are registered or in this line, and you have to be there by 8 or your registration deadline is cut off. You can't come in after that, but they will take you no matter how many people are there. They'll take you straight through, but you can't register after 8 a.m. So you could be there from anywhere. I could get there. If I got there at 6 a.m, I'd be out by 6:45. If I got there at 7:30, I'd be out by noon. It was
So it's a big window.
Yeah. So I had to do that every single week, which was awful. And then it was a matter of like, going home, giving yourself the shot and all that. And then I finally did the trigger shot. I went in for the procedure, right? And I was like, this is the part that really got me, right? I was in the waiting room and I met this group of women, and they were all really nice. And we were hyping each other up like, you're so beautiful, and, blah, 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 blah. And I met a woman who had been there like 3 times. And I'm like, girl, you must be rich, because this is like $8,000 a pop. So I'm like, how have you been doing this 3 times? But she had been through there 3 times. Like this was her last time. So we were like just praying for her and speaking. Like we were literally like, when you're, drunk in the bathroom at a club and you meet a bunch of girls and like you're always boosting, like you're so beautiful. Oh
you tell your whole life story. Yeah. Okay.
So we were gonna exchange phone numbers and keep in touch. And I was like, keep in touch. Like let's connect and blah blah blah. And we were like, I walked out of there thinking like, oh my gosh, I met girlfriends. This is nice. Like blah blah blah. And then I woke up from the procedure. They put us in the recovery room or whatever. They give you your crackers and all that stuff. And I like gave my phone number to the ladies. I was like, because I gave my number to all the ladies or whatever before we left the operating room. And none of them has called me. Not one of them. Nobody texted me. Nobody reached out to me. I'm telling you, we made a connection in that room. And I thought that we were going to connect with each other. And none of them reached out to me. And I was like,
wow.
I got like ghosted in the waiting room. I was so upset. But anyway, so the procedure itself went well. I think I had about 25 eggs, and I think they harvested like 14 or 15 of them.
Oh wow.
So that means I had 14 or 15 opportunities. I don't have that kind of money, but I have 14 or 15 opportunities to potentially either have a surrogate, or if God willing I can make it happen, have the baby myself. So
okay.
Yeah, so I mean you obviously you went through quite a lot throughout that process, and obviously how were you feeling at the time? It must have been quite hard, I would think.
I was really resentful, to be honest with you, because it's like I had plenty of opportunities to have a baby. Like I could have just you have boyfriends, you have, you know what I mean, like plenty of time where you could just been like, we're having a baby. And I always made sure I played it safe. I always like I did the right thing. You know, all of my girlfriends are like having babies now and even then and stuff like that. And it was so bittersweet because like, you know, even some of them that like are not even, that don't even want to have kids, that are just like, oh, pregnant again. I'm like, you know what I mean? Like, get pregnant. And so for me, there was a little bit of resentment there. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat and pretend like everything was roses and sunshine. There's a little bit of resentment because I want to have a baby. And like, I felt like somebody threw a monkey wrench in my whole picket fence reality that I had going for myself. And so it was hard to get through that. It was hard to get through it alone. You know, and it was one of those things where I'm glad I did it because I know, at least I know now that if down the line it comes to that point, I'm able to do it, and they're stored, I believe, for 5 years for free. So I'm like 2 years into this. I probably better get a move on actually. But I also had put it out to my Facebook groups that I'm in, the L positive groups, and I asked if there were any women on there who had gotten pregnant and brought a baby full term while on Alecensa or on the medication that I'm taking. And a lot of people reached out to me and were like, yeah, absolutely. I've had 2 babies on this medication and had no.
Really?
Yeah, but they're on a reduced dose. Like I'm on 600 milligrams twice a day. I think they're on a reduced dosage. So I feel like if I get to the point where I only have one main tumor left on my left-hand side. If I get to a point where that tumor is either cut out and removed or, you know, God willing, I'm Ned, that would be wonderful. There's a possibility that if I take my medication dosage down, I could still have a baby naturally and do it myself. And so that's kind of my frame of thinking right now, and where I'm thinking or where I'm trying to go, and what I'm hoping and praying for, you know, because I mean, obviously I can get pregnant on my own. I don't have to use the eggs that I frozen. I could stop my birth control and get pregnant at any time. You know, like that was the thing that got me, is like, as I'm in all these ultrasound appointments, like, yep, your, you know, uterus is great. Your fallopian tubes are wonderful. You're making a great amount of eggs. You're totally healthy. And I'm like, shut up. Like, you're really not helping me right now. You know, like basically you could have had a baby at any time, girl. You're good to go. But that's my plan.
You hear so many stories, well, in our groups of, you know, women who were just shocked that, like, wait a minute, like they can't have kids, and you know they weren't told that, you know, once you start taking the medication, then it's a wrap. Like, you know, there are no studies that are being done, and you know, and so, you know, the fact that
I made sure I asked.
That you were able to educate yourself, like, kudos to you, you know, for doing that, because
I mean, I definitely agree, because I know I've heard of lots of people not being asked or what have you, and it's one of those things you think it's not something you can take back, really, is it? So it's really not right. And I mean, if an oncologist or whoever is doing the treatment is not asking that question, you know, now is the time to do so. Perhaps, you know, listening to Jaymie's story will, you know, put that person in the right direction. But there are quite a few people that don't have that. So I'm pleased that they've asked you that, and also understand at the same time that you went through a very challenging experience, processing lung cancer, your diagnosis, and then also, you know, sort of
the loss
trying to put
not having
the bigger picture
perfect what you wanted.
And I think, I mean, you really tapped into, Jaymie, how, you know, in life you kind of go down this path, and you know, you want things to happen and so on and so forth, and then all of a sudden cancer strikes or what have you, and then you just have to kind of say, wait a minute, is this me? Is this really happening? Like, is this a movie? Like, really? And obviously you've done what you needed to do, which is good, Angie.
Zoom is telling me I have less than a minute. I thought Zoom was giving you unlimited time.
It should just kick in and be like, this thing is unlimited.
No, it should actually.
I've got less than a minute left, so if we get kicked out, then I will have
to log back in. Okay.
Or,
I mean, I get kicked out quite often, Angie, so that's okay, isn't it? That's a joke. So I guess, you know, for like in my experience, my oncologist asked me about, you know, what I was doing, like family wise or what have you, and I you know, I didn't really even think about it when I was diagnosed with cancer. Like, you know, you just you know, the future planning, like the goals and the dreams and all that sort of things that sort of come to play. What about you, Angie? Like, when you all of a sudden you get this diagnosis, because it took you a while, and then all of a sudden all your goals and dreams just sit right in front of you, don't they? And you just start thinking, You just
Yeah,
don't
no,
believe it. No?
they wheeled me, by the time I got, my diagnosis, they had dropped the ball so much
Yeah.
that it was just like, like, because the whole time they were telling me it's not cancer, and then baff, it's like
Mm.
stage 4 cancer. And so by this time they're just like, okay, we got to do this, we got to do that. You get the appointment with the gynecologist, and she was asking me about my family planning, and if I wanted another kid, and if I wanted to postpone the treatment for a month, so I do exactly what you did,
Mm.
Jaymie, to freeze my eggs. And I've had experience with egg freezing and all of that, fertility stuff. I can talk about it another eventually. But yeah,
Mm.
and I was just like, you know what? This, like, I was